He was meant to be indestructible, but now looks miserable and hopeless. Water it and it rots, don't and it dries out. What's wrong with it? Zamiokulkas is probably the most popular plant in Polish homes and offices in recent years. Today we'll look where no one else looks, we'll look inside, and I'll tell you what's most important in growing Zamiokulkas and what you need to do so they don't look like this. This is the heart of the plant. These bulbs here, both smaller and larger, tell us whether this plant can still be saved. If they're soft and water is leaking from them, then it's probably too late, but if they're dried out and gray, we can still save it. And in a moment, I'll tell you how to do it. Today I'll show you a super mix that makes water in a pot with Zamiokulkas flow right through like a sieve. There are no blockages and the roots take up as much water as they need. And later I'll show you a great trick with a string, how to hold the Zamiokulkas stems so they don't fall over. Good morning, good morning. Today I'll tell you how not to be an enemy to your Zamiokulkas, how to function really well with it. Before I do that, of course, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Let me know if you have problems with Zamiokulkas or not. It's commonly known that these are basically indestructible plants that don't cause any problems, but I think it's completely different. The first and most basic rule for caring for Zamiokulkas. You need to know what these clumps look like, meaning these potato-like things here are the water storage organs in the Zamiokulkas. If they're moist, water is dripping from them, and you can squeeze them, it means there's too much water in there. However, if they're firm and their color is brownish-gray or even sometimes creamy, it means they're in good condition. But if they're like in this case, meaning they're starting to wrinkle, it means they don't have enough water. But out of the two, this is a much better situation than if they were soaking wet. Zamiokulkas is a plant that naturally comes from Central Africa. It grows in a Mayombo formation where the temperature is high and there are low thickets. So it's a bit hidden, but there's absolutely no water there. In those bulbs, it can store water for even several weeks. That's why the most important thing is not to overwater the Zamiokulkas. It's also important, if you try to repot it, to clean off those dried, old, rotten roots, because those definitely won't come back to life here. Zamiokulkas, as is commonly known, can handle being in dark rooms, but it's not entirely true that it will do well where there is no light at all. But the most important thing when it comes to growing and caring for Zamiokulkas is what it's growing in. As I showed you, these bulbs need the right mix, and now I'm giving you a special recipe for a mix straight from me. Here we have 40–50% of regular potting soil. It can already have some additives, some small elements, or it might not, 20–25%. This is perlite. Perlite is, listen, powdered rock that is processed under high temperature. Its main purpose is to loosen the soil, retain water, and then release it. And the third ingredient is expanded clay. The main purpose of expanded clay is to loosen the mixture so that water flows through it like a sieve. And you need to mix it all together, and then you have the perfect substrate to plant our Zamiokulkas. The mixture is ready. You can use coconut chips instead of expanded clay if available. How do you check if the mixture is good? First of all, it can't be so compact that when you squeeze it, it holds together. Gently move it, it should fall apart on its own from that ball. Of course, this soil here is a bit dry. If we add a little more water, it will be more cohesive. But look, this is the right mix to plant Zamiokulkas in. My dear friends, many of you write to me, especially on Instagram, saying that you bought a Zamiokulkas, repotted it, and it hasn't grown or produced any leaves for 2 years. A very important aspect is to choose the right pot for it. We don't give it a pot that's 10 sizes bigger, just 1 or 2 sizes bigger, meaning 1 to 2 centimeters wider. Why? Because Zamiokulkas has other priorities. First, it has to develop its roots before it can grow leaves. So if you give it a big pot, it will spend the first 2 years building its foundation underground before it finally starts producing leaves. Now that we know which pot to choose for our Zamiokulkas, what should we do next? So I have one that's about 2.5 centimeters bigger than the one it was growing in. Those roots are a bit dried out, so when they get some water, they'll immediately regain some turgor and increase their mass. At the very beginning, I also add some expanded clay to the very bottom. A layer about 1 1/8 inches thick. I'm taking it out. I take the plant out of the pot. I don't set it very deep. It seems that about 1/3 of an inch deeper than it was in the pot is fine, and I cover the plant with this new mix. It's important I don't press it down too much. I can loosen the roots a little, the root ball, bring out some of those tubers so that soil can get in between them as well. Gently, just lightly. I shake it so the soil nicely fills the whole pot. And actually, I could say it's done, but I guess it's not because it still keeps falling over. So now we have to help it. Before it gains strength, before it lifts its stems and leaves a bit, we need to support it. And that's why I prepared some sticks. Sticks like the ones from orchids, for example, which will help me make a gentle frame here and help keep the Zamiokulkas leaves upright. I used, my friends, those orchid sticks. They can be black, they can be green, and I stuck them in various places. Of course, we need to make sure we're not piercing the bulb, so we should stick them into the spaces between the bulbs. For now, they're stable like this, just on my word of honor. However, if we water them a little, because my Zamiokulkas plants were a bit dried out, if you have ones that are overwatered, the situation will be the opposite. Then the root ball will be more soaked. I stuck in a few pieces, 4 or 5, depending on how big your pot is. And now, pay attention. A jute string like this, which I'll use to gently tie these leaf stems, but remember gently because Zamiokulkas is very delicate. And these stems, if we tie them too tightly, it might turn out that they could break. Especially if they are very hydrated or, like in this case, when they are very dried out. We'll help them stand upright so that they have some support here, meaning we're making a kind of frame for them. In fact, these sticks won't really be very visible later on, once the Zamiokulkas starts growing. Once we tie it all together, you'll see it's all going to look really nice. I'm getting to work cutting small pieces of string and tying them in several places. The Zamiokulkas revival is essentially complete. But I also wanted to answer your next question. Does the Zamiokulkas produce enough oxygen at night to put it in the bedroom so it could replace an open window? The answer is no. Of course, the Zamiokulkas opens its stomata during the night, but it doesn't produce enough oxygen to replace, for example, an open window. However, it is an excellent absorber of various toxins. That's why having a Zamiokulkas in the bedroom is a great solution. Put Zamiokulkas plants in your bedrooms and the air will be cleaner. It works like an air filter. My dear friends, the Zamiokulkas refresh is done. I think it looks much better with those upright leaves. Now in this case, since it was a bit dried out, it needs to drink, so we give it some water, but carefully, not too much, and in smaller amounts. For the next 2-3 hours, we can water it lightly, not too much. However, if the Zamiokulkas plants you are reviving or rescuing were overwatered, then actually, if you put them in such a pot, just leave them for 2 to 3 weeks. Don't even water them, but place them in a brighter spot, maybe not in full sunlight, but in a typical place with diffused light. It needs time to recover. In this case, the leaves need to regain more turgor and strengthen themselves. However, in the case when it was overwatered, they need to recover a bit from the water, they need to absorb some of that water, and then you can definitely move it to your bedroom so it can purify the air for you. Let me know if you also had situations like this with Zamiokulkas, where they were either overwatered or dried out. If you have such wilted plants, try what I showed you here and send me a photo on Instagram showing how your Zamiokulkas has improved.